What's the most fked up thing that you have ever done? I worked at a super shady telemarketing company right after high school. They made people think they were a charity but they weren't. They sold stuff supposedly assembled by handicapped people, and I talked in a voice that led people to believe I was mentally handicapped so they would feel bad and buy from me. I've never hated myself more and I deserve to have my ass kicked. The same thing happened to me. I didn't want to ask anything personal. But are you from the Detroit area by chance? Some of the charities they had us reading for were the Fraternal Order of Police and Vietnam Veterans of America. One day me and couple of other guys went in for a shift and it was closed. We found out later they'd been shut down. Pissed myself at a friend's house, then his parents had to replace the carpet. Edit. All these I peed myself 2 stories do make me feel better. Thank guys. Cheers for the award too. Some kid's house I had to go to every Sunday after church. I would always sit in the C chair while we were more or less forced to watch VeggieTales. And over about a year I coated the wall facing side of this chair with my boogers. The whole time I would just pick my nose and wipe it on this chair. Anyway, when his family was moving, his parents were furious enough with him at how disgusting he was that he would coat one of their chairs with a full-fledged booger wall that he mentioned it to me at church a few weeks later. The punishment had been that bad. He was furious at his little sister. Because he knew he didn't do it, so who else could it be except her? I didn't say anything. Take that, Jesus. When I was a kid, a friend of mine came over for pizza and left. I was upset that he didn't stay to hang out. Heard something at my window and it was him getting my attention, asking if he could have the leftover marinara sauce. I said sure. Slightly opened the little marinara container and tossed it to him. He had on a brand new Tommy Hilfiger winter jacket. I stole some Mother Teresa cards from our church and convinced my little cousin to go with me door to door selling them, saying we were trying to raise money for the less fortunate. We then used that money to go buy snacks at 7-Eleven. I was 12 and to this day I randomly wake up wondering WTF was I thinking. Doesn't sound like it's the most fked up thing ever, but it did stick with me. Edit. I didn't mean for this to turn into what it did. I saw a post and thought I'd share this stupid crummy memory. I wasn't trying to start this debate or shit. I was just sharing a memory with you all, but like always, Reddit does what Reddit does best. Silk underwear was a thing way back. I shat myself once while on a sled with my brother. I somehow managed to unzip and bury it while crying in anger and frustration. Mum found it while walking the dog. I cried again. I was on a hike with my family and my cousins when I was like 9. One of my cousins was there with his girlfriend. He was like 17 and was being recruited to play college basketball. So he was a big 6'8" dude and he shat himself at the top of a big mountain in Hawaii. He buried his underpants off trail and kept walking. Tons of people smelled it and a dog dug them up. And he started crying. My first year of college, there was a really annoying guy in my class. He was a total douche. One day he left class and my buddy and I saw that he left his book on the desk. We took it, sold it to the bookstore and got burgers with the money. I helped him look for his lost book the next day for an hour. Goddamn. You are the myth I've heard about of someone who would steal your wallet and then help you look for it. I'm my parts, we call those cracktivities. Mostly because it's shitty crackheads do. Not calling you a crackhead. The story just made me think of that urban legend. It isn't the most fked up thing, but the thing that makes me feel bad all the time. Years ago I took my mom's very nice stapler to work and left it there when I quit. I use a stapler multiple times a day and I feel so bad whenever I do. Mayo. A couple of friends of mine had a sleepover at my house one time and we got a really dumb idea. Hey, what if we take some deodorant and ketchup and draw human outlines with giant dongs on people's driveways in my neighborhood and in ketchup write the words "get out" next to it? So yeah, that's what we did. Anyways, the cops show up next morning and boy was I glad to think ahead and draw one on my own family's driveway to make us look like victims. Never got caught thankfully. But looking back, adding "get out" was definitely drove that over the edge, and now I realize how fked up the whole thing was. A long time ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth and you could make prank phone calls. My friends and I called a random number. A woman answered and in a small child's voice I asked her if she knew where my parents were. I must have gone on for at least 5 minutes. Asking for my parents. Got all upset. The whole 9 yards. At the end I said I had to go and hung up on her. To this day that poor woman has no idea what happened to that little girl. I'm not proud of this. But I stopped talking to a girl I was interested in because of her home life. We were getting to know each other. And I was invited over. Drove over there and her house was absolutely filthy. Didn't see any roaches but wouldn't be surprised if I saw one. I stayed there for most of the day hanging out and talking, but in the back of my mind I couldn't wait to get out of there. She was living with a friend's family of anywhere between 7 and 9 kids. Because she was having drama with her own family. The house reeked of animal urine and there was just trash everywhere. The carpets felt sticky tacky. I was just plain uncomfortable. After the day was over, I went home and practically burned my skin off in the shower. I don't know what it was. But going there gave me so much anxiety I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just ghosted her. Don't even remember her name anymore. I felt like such a piece of shit typing that out. I was 3 or 4 years old. Went to amusement park with family. Got into ball pit. Having a good time. Then, in the ball pit with me, I notice there's a kid with some kind of disability or illness. Completely bald. With tubes coming out of his nose. I screamed. Cried. And called him a monster and pointed until my parents came and got me out of the ball pit. I probably ruined some Make-A-Wish kids' whole day. My friend and I played Poo Dollar one Saturday evening on campus in college. Now the traditional way of playing Poo Dollar is to simply put a piece of poo and smush it into a crumbled up dollar bill. And when someone finds it in excitement, they get poo on their hands. It's evil already by itself. However, a third wanted to join in on the fun. And he's a huge Star Wars fan. He had a huge wad of fake $10 dollar bills with Jar Jar Binks' face on it. He won them as a kid at Chuck E. Cheese. He said each bill was 5 tickets each. And bought a wad with the 100 tickets he won. He told himself as a kid that these would come in handy one day. Now mind you, these looked identical to a $10 bill. Except substitute good ol' Alex Hamilton for Jar Jar F. King Binks. So this means that people would pick up this seemingly fake $10 bill in excitement. Find poo on their hands. But find consolation in that it's still a $10 bill. But nope. We even took the consolation away. It was a fake Jar Jar Binks $10 bill and you have poo on your hands. We had a marathon race the entire school. I was in second place most of the race and the guy in front of me would have won no doubt. Instead I told him it would be a good idea if we both ran across the finish line together. He agreed. Only for me to run ahead just a few meters before the finish line. I won, but in the most shitty way ever. It was a good lesson though. If I can't win properly, I'd much rather come second. I told my mum she should have aborted me. I meant it too. But maybe I could have kept it to myself. My mom tried to make me mad at my dad for saying what are we going to do when she told him she was pregnant with me. I guess trying to imply he wanted to abort. I straight up told her, you could have. I wouldn't have known the difference. Before I was on my meds, I went quite culty. Like, sitting in a pentagram of candles, cutting myself, offering blood to dark deities and chanting their names, kind of culty. Literally almost performed human sacrifice with myself as the sacrifice. It's still something of a trigger for me in a different sense of the word. I am a non-believer. But during episodes I felt like magic was real as well as deities. So if I find myself thinking I should go and chant to the moon, it's usually a sign that I am doing worse than I may have realized and should go easy on myself. In kindergarten, whenever I ran out of toilet paper in the stalls, I would start wiping my ass with my finger and smearing the shit on the walls. I also would barely wash my hands. I got found out and was scolded by my teacher, the janitors, and the principal. My parents however still don't know. I banned a guy from my Discord server because he was outed as a pedo. Even drew a picture of a cute cat saying fuck pedophiles in the announcement. 2 days later he bought a gun and shot himself in the head. His suicide note was in the form of angry texts to his ex-victim. He blamed her and then he blamed me for ruining his reputation, his life. I'm partially responsible for his suicide. And I don't regret it at all. FCK pedophiles. Oh yes. My time to shine. I had a period of my life where I hoard like a lot. In this time I was seeing 2 guys at the same time. In one occasion I give an oral to one of them and let him see in my boobs. Then, out of nowhere this other dude tells me he's coming down to my house. So I rushed the first one out of there. But didn't have time to clean myself. So when this other dude arrives, I still had plenty of the other on me. Anyway, we start making out and stuff. As I was too damn lost and lost to care about. So when I felt his tongue driven from my neck to my boobs, nothing clicked. Until he threw his head up and said that my boobs tasted weird. Oh lord. I can't express how bad I felt about it. Just told him I have been working out and was sweating. We headed to the shower. And cleaned myself properly. That day will go to eternity as the day I made a dude taste the little guys of other dude. FFS time to expose myself. During middle school I hustled a little bit. You know, buy cigarettes for $1 and sell them for $2 etc. Anyways, the school had these rooms that you needed a key fob to open. A teacher walked by and dropped her fob, so I figured I could sell it. I sold it to some random guy on the street for 60 bucks. For a kid from a poor background who hustled for something to eat, it was loads. I found out about a week later that the school was robbed. All the computers, books, basically anything of value. We found out that they got in from the staff entrance at the back, which needed a fob. Still feel guilty about it to this day. It was a public school with little to no funding in a poor area. When I was young, maybe 4th grade, I was at a sleepover with a group of friends at my friend B's house. We were messaging another girl from our class. And I said it would be funny if we told A that we had heard that B had been in a car accident and would never walk again. We played up the story. Said B was currently in the hospital. Doctors said the prognosis was bad. She might die. I was freaking out. B thought it was funny. I kept adding more graphic detail. Thought it was hilarious. Until A called B's mom, who marched upstairs and told us off for being little shits. Which we were. I still feel horrible about it. Little girls can crow, little idiots. I've smoked 31 cigarettes in 12 hours. That happened when I went a trip to near town with 2 of my friends. They went to trade some games in biggest Gamma Trade Center. I bought 2 packs of cigarettes in kiosk at train station. Before we went to that center, I've already smoked 14 of them. We walked 5 kilometers. Then, returning from the center to the train station, I smoked the remaining 17 cigarettes. This route was 5 kilometers long. That was my last day I was smoking. It was 9 years ago. I've smoked for 11 years. If you tries to quit smoking, believe in yourself. Because I believe in you. I punched a really nice kid who was also my best friend in the stomach as hard as I could for absolutely no good reason. I was an ADHD 7-year-old. He was in tons of pain. It wasn't even in revenge. I was just frustrated with him because he couldn't remember an episode of a cartoon that I was trying to talk to him about. He's actually still one of my best friends to this day. Which is weird. Edit. Forgot to mention that I regret it deeply. I actually am extremely guilty for doing this. I've grown up now. When I was in kindergarten, this African American guy came in to present something. I saw him. Turned around to the only African American girl in my class and said, "Your dad's here really loud." The girl said, "That's not my dad." Years later. The thought of it still makes me cringe. Wish I had a time machine to go back to kindergarten and slap my 5-year-old self before I said that. Dropped an N-bomb in a non-joking way in front of a black friend of mine. I was drunk. And in company of guys who I knew were low-key racist. Trying to be edgy. Etc. Was like 10 years ago and it still haunts my thoughts on a weekly basis. I hate to think that I'm part of what he thinks about when he reflects on times he's experienced racism. But there's really no defense for what I did. I prank called a random number using a 1-800 at late 90s, and a woman accepted the call with me only saying I am in jail instead of using a name. The lady got hysterical after she accepted the call thinking it was her son, so she went along with it and not thinking twice about my tone of voice. I even threw my voice off pretending to be the detective after finding out the son's name from her. I told he was arrested for touching a minor. She said she was on her way down to the jailhouse lol. When I was in high school I was driving home a friend and asked what they would do if I blew my brains out while driving. They gave a really sincere answer and, being the arsehole I was at the time, I took a BB pistol out from the pocket on the back of the seat. Put it in my mouth and pulled the trigger. She had a pretty big crush on me and started crying instantly. I still hate myself for that one and desperately want to apologize. But I don't really have any way to contact her anymore. I went to a church retreat to the mountains to be closer to God. One day we had to sit at a designated spot and pray for like 6 hours. I said FCK that and looked for cool looking sticks. I started whittling a pretty good stick with the pocket knife I brought with me. It turned into a pretty good spear. Eventually I saw a frog hopping around. I was like, what are the chances, and threw it at the frog, which was like 10 feet away. I actually nailed it and felt super bad. Like, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that I hit it since I tried. But I really thought I'd miss. I watched it die and used the last couple hours making a grave out of stones and a headstone out of sticks. Not the worst thing. But I think about that frog sometimes. When I was about 7 years old or so, my classmates and I were all in recess and there was a big puddle we were all standing around. Anyway, we were sort of jumping around it, getting close to jumping in it. Sort of like tempting fate a bit. We had a special needs kid in our class. I don't remember what was wrong with him exactly, basically mentally handicapped. Anyway, he was doing it too and for some reason, I pushed him in. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't a bully and never did things like that. But I pushed him in and he was soaked in muddy water and was crying. I immediately felt awful and still think about how awful a thing it was to do and feel bad about it. It was one of the worst things I've ever done to someone. When I was about 8 years old, one of friend's parents paid me $200 to break their kid's leg so that they could get him to stop playing soccer. So I convinced him to climb a tree with me and got him to go out to a branch that could support me. But not him. About 5 minutes later he's got a broken leg and I've got $200. I'm a military veteran, so any conversation about the absolute worst thing I've done could get overly complicated pretty quickly, but honestly the period I feel the most guilt about would be right after I got out of the army. I'd been in an all-male max testosterone environment for 4 years. And suddenly I was a college student. Surrounded by freshman girls who were away from home and parents for the first time. I was several years older. Vastly more experienced. And still carrying a military mindset. I was very mission and goal oriented. And not very interested in consequences. I really used a lot of people. I never hurt anyone. But I was manipulative. Deceptive and ruthless. And I was careless with the feelings of girls who deserve better. A few months ago I catfished this girl and we were dating. I broke it off because I felt really bad about lying, so I went on my main account and befriended her. She is definitely sus about the things me and the catfish have in common, but we're still close and talk on a daily. We had a fight with the other neighborhood's kids. We cornered 3 of them with sticks and I threw a sharpened stick straight into his face. I almost blinded him and he had a big wound on his forehead. It was a very dumb impulsive dick move on my part. I beat the daylights out of someone. Threw him in a truck stop dumpster. And pissed all over him. Heard later that the dude had a concussion and several broken ribs when he got pulled out of there. Did it because a stupid F. Was drunk and slapped my ass. Berserk mode activated. I got a BB gun when I was young and I had no respect for the lives of birds. So I would shoot birds every time I saw them until I got into high school. I know I killed a lot, but I remember killing 30 or so birds till I learnt I was a psychopath. When I was 15 I was in love with this girl and I also had never had a GF. 25 and I still don't, but let's not talk about that. Anyway, due to certain circumstances she was living with me and my parents. Long story, and I was curious one day. And off my meds, I get super hyper and I used to be really spastic. Anyway, I knew that this was the only chance I'd ever get, so I groped one of her breasts just so I could see what they felt like. I knew it was wrong and I felt like a piece of shit after, and still do to this day, but I was somewhat satisfied that at least I got to know what it was like. In my defense, there's no defense for sexual harassment and I'm still deeply ashamed. She was pretty annoyed, but it didn't really have a big effect on her. I basically just got in trouble for it. I was ready for that, and we pretty much moved on. We're still friends to this day and keep trying to make it up to her somehow. But she usually refuses my suggestions, like punching me in the face for example. In retrospect it's not something super terrible, but it's still something I'm ashamed of. Other than that though, I've mostly just been a well-behaved guy. That was the only time I ever did something like that.